Arthur Vega knelt in the pit he'd spent all morning digging, sweat trickling in steady lines down the sides of his face. Terrace 4 was as miserable as the reports warned. A sun-baked wasteland strewn with the debris of a conflict that had ended only because both sides had deemed this planet unworthy of further bloodshed. Every clang of his shovel against the reddish soil reminded him how pointless it all felt. The salvage company that had hired him cared only about scraps of valuable tech, but he was just a mercenary, eager for pay, unconcerned with the planet's brutal heat or the layers of dust that choked every breath. He did as instructed. Excavate potential sites, mark them for the real salvage teams, then move on to the next stretch of land. He leaned on the shovel handle, glancing toward his comrade, Decker, who was half-slouched against a mound of scrap, taking a moment to rehydrate. Decker was ex-military, same as Arthur. Both had drifted from one mercenary gig to another, never landing in the same place for too long. Arthur raised an eyebrow at his friend. "You gonna help finish this trench? Or is the sun frying your brain?" Decker snorted. 1 minute, tough guy. He poured water over his face, letting it cascade over the neck guard of his battered chest plate. "Not all of us thrive in a sauna." Arthur rolled his eyes. "Yeah, well, I like to get off this rock before we both become mummies." Terrace 4 had been declared a demilitarized zone after the final treaty between the Kalari and Swan empires. Neither empire had gained anything but exhausted arsenals and dead soldiers. Into that vacuum came freelance salvagers, hoping to pluck whatever advanced weaponry or data modules had been left behind. The company that had hired Arthur's team wanted a set of trenches dug to fortify a small encampment near a half-buried warship. Apparently, there was still something of value in its remains. Arthur planted the shovel again. It met resistance with a metallic clang, jarring his arms. He paused, expecting to see some battered hull plating. Instead, something gleamed under a thin layer of dusty soil. Crouching, he cleared dirt away with careful sweeps of his gloved hand. It wasn't the dull gray or battered black of standard battlefield debris. The surface shimmered as if coated in liquid silver. "What the?" Arthur leaned closer. Intricate markings curved around the surface, lines so deliberate they reminded him of script or runes. He brushed more dirt aside and found that he was holding what appeared to be a helmet, unlike any standard-issue piece he had ever encountered. Its shape suggested a humanoid head, but the craftsmanship was almost impossibly fine. With a grunt of effort, he eased the helmet free. "Decker," he called, his voice tense with excitement. "You gotta see this." He heard no response. Instead, he felt the sudden prickle of awareness at the back of his neck, that soldier's sixth sense that told him he was being watched. Rising slowly, helmet in hand, he looked toward the ridge. Figures stood there, dozens of them, humanoid but unmistakably alien. Their armor, if that was what it was, shared the same silvery sheen as the helmet. Arthur's grip on the strange artifact tightened. The aliens stared at him with an intensity that made his chest pound. A moment later, they all dropped to their knees, bowing in unison. The abruptness of it sent a chill down his spine. He glanced around, hoping to spot Decker or any of the other mercenaries. The entire sight had fallen silent. That was when one figure, slender and graceful, stepped forward, cutting through the gathered ranks. Like the others, she wore gleaming armor, though hers had delicate filigree along the edges and left glimpses of pale blue skin at her neck and wrists. She walked right up to Arthur, stopping a few paces away. Her silver hair caught Terrace IV's harsh sunlight, and her deep azure eyes settled on his face as though she could see straight into his mind. Her gaze flicked down to the helmet in his grip. She bowed her head reverently. "The prophecy of Keeler," she said, her words somehow translated into standard through the implant in Arthur's ear, "is fulfilled. You have found the crown of ascension." Arthur blinked. What are you talking about?" She straightened, voice quivering with something akin to awe. "You are the one we have awaited, the rightful bearer of the crown." Before he could protest, the others around them bowed even lower. His heart hammered at the realization that whatever this helmet was, it mattered deeply to them. He wanted to drop it, to rid himself of the sudden weight. Yet some quiet part of him refused. He felt an odd resonance in his chest, as though the helmet were pulsing with his own heartbeat. He tried again to speak, but was cut off by the shrill roar of engines. Overhead, gunmetal gray dropships descended, stirring clouds of crimson dust. Arthur recognized the silhouette of Standard Salvage, transports used by the mercenary team he worked for. He almost sighed in relief. Help had arrived. Or so he thought. The slender alien woman gave an imperious gesture, and her soldiers rose, forming a protective circle around Arthur. An uneasy standoff formed as the transport ramps lowered, revealing armed mercenaries. Among them was Decker, who looked as stunned as Arthur felt. Some tense, silent moments passed, each side eyeing the other with weapons drawn. Then, the aliens parted. The woman approached Arthur again, calmly holding out her hand, palm up. "My name is Lixa," she said, "first daughter of House Terrace. You hold a crown, and by ancient decree, you are Keeler reborn. My people will ensure your safety." Arthur's pulse pounded. I need an explanation." He found himself aboard a vast vessel that seemed grown rather than built. Corridors curved in gentle arcs, metal walls shimmering with what looked like living inscriptions. The interior was lit by a soft blue glow that emanated from patterns on the walls and ceilings. The air smelled faintly of ozone and something floral. He walked beside Lixa, still carrying the helmet, feeling like he'd stepped into a dream. Behind him, Decker and two others from the mercenary team were escorted by more alien warriors, all wearing the same reflective armor. No one had openly threatened them. In fact, the aliens had insisted on showing deference to Arthur, addressing him by a title that sounded like Keeler. Despite that courtesy, the tension was razor-sharp. The mercenaries were outnumbered and far from any fallback point. They entered a circular chamber with a high ceiling that resembled an ornate dome. Strange glyphs shone at the edges of the chamber. Arthur took a moment to look around. One wall displayed a mosaic of images, tall, lithe figures battling shadow-like creatures, led by someone wearing the same helmet Arthur now clutched under his arm. Lixa regarded him quietly for a long moment before speaking. "You appear unsettled, Arthur Vega." He didn't bother hiding his confusion. "Unsettled? That's putting it mildly. My people and I were just digging for salvage. Then you and your warriors appear out of nowhere, and I'm supposed to be some prophesied leader." She nodded once, as though that was a perfectly normal chain of events. "The texts foretell of Keeler returning to us when our darkest foe, the Voidborn, rises again. The crown of ascension is the key. It has slept beneath the soil for millennia, waiting for the rightful bearer." Arthur swallowed hard. His thoughts raced to the warlike shapes in the mosaic. And who are these Voidborn? At the mention of that name, Lix's face took on a grave cast. "They're the ancient enemy of my people, the Tsulval, beings that prey upon life energy, devouring worlds to feed their hunger. They were banished long ago, but now we have reason to believe they're returning." A flicker of movement behind Lixa caught Arthur's eye. A tall Tsulval warrior, armored in elaborate plating, stepped forward. Where Lix's presence radiated calm, his radiated an imposing authority that bordered on aggression. The edges of his armor flared with faint, metallic ridges. "Keeler must report to the High Council," the warrior said, addressing Lixa but glancing with icy skepticism at Arthur. "The crown's discovery cannot wait." Arthur stiffened, disliking how the warrior's gaze seemed to dismiss him. Lixa dipped her head. "Commander Thess is correct," she murmured to Arthur, though her posture suggested no small tension with the man. "We must tell our council of your arrival." Arthur wasn't sure how much choice he really had, so he forced a shrug. "All right, let on." He looked over his shoulder at Decker, who gave him a questioning shrug in return. The two of them had survived firefights on half a dozen worlds, but this was entirely different. Arthur felt like a trespasser in some cosmic myth. As they walked deeper into the vessel's corridors, Arthur heard heated whispers among the Tsulval warriors. It didn't sound like reverence so much as debate. Perhaps, Arthur thought, not all of them believed in the prophecy. It dawned on him that he might be walking into an alien political quagmire. But for now, there was no turning back. Later, Arthur stood in a wide hall adorned with tapestries that shifted in the ambient light, as if made of living threads. The High Council was arranged on raised seats that arced across the far side of the hall. Each counselor had hair ranging from silver to pale gold, braided with small metallic ornaments. They examined Arthur with an unsettling intensity, their pale blue skin creasing with age or interest. Commander Thess introduced Arthur in a clipped tone that made it sound like he was presenting a prisoner. Lixa, standing beside Arthur, spoke more gently, explaining the crown's sudden unearthing on Terrace 4 and how it had signaled that the Prophesied Keeler had come. High Elder Run, seated at the center, inclined his head. The crown was forged by our forebears to combat the Voidborn. Legends say it will only awaken in the hands of Keeler. Arthur cleared his throat, uneasy at being the subject of so many unblinking stares. I'm nobody special, just a man with a shovel who happened to dig in the right or wrong spot. Lix's gaze flicked to him. But you found it, and it responded to you. He glanced at the helmet, which still gave him a strange sense of connection. Maybe it was a coincidence. I'm not exactly from around here. Another council member leaned forward, his braids clinking softly. Prophecy guides us, but we must confirm. The crown has been hidden for 10,000 cycles, waiting. Would you deny the will of the ancients? Arthur ran a hand through his sweat-dried hair. I deny a lot of things that don't make sense. I'm just trying to keep my people alive, get my pay, and leave. A murmur of disapproval rippled through the council. Commander Thess's lips curled. High Elder, must we indulge this? Rin raised a hand. The prophecy never stated Keeler would be Sulval. We should not dismiss the possibility that fate chose an outsider. He studied Arthur with a thoughtful expression. There is a bonding ritual with the crown. If it truly has accepted you, the ritual will grant you knowledge you lack. Perhaps then you will believe. Arthur wanted to refuse outright. Something about the idea of letting an alien artifact bond with his mind was unsettling. Still, he remembered how it had glinted in his hands, how it had felt like a heartbeat thrumming in unison with his own. If the Sulval were correct, if these void-born creatures posed a threat not just to them, but to the galaxy at large, could he really walk away? He looked at Lixa. She inclined her head, as though urging him to accept. The intensity of her gaze moved something within him. All right, he said slowly. If going through with this, bonding can give me answers, I'll do it. But I'm not promising anything else. I'm not about to lead an army of aliens into some cosmic war unless I'm sure it's the right thing to do. Commander Thess bared his teeth in what could have been a scowl or a sneer. High Eldarin nodded. That is enough for now. We shall make the preparations. Arthur's shoulders sagged with a mixture of apprehension and acceptance. He glanced at Decker and the other mercenaries, who looked on uneasily from the edges of the hall. They, too, realized how quickly their simple salvage mission had spiraled into cosmic prophecy. None of them knew how to react. Arthur guessed that in their place, he would have been just as unnerved. But he had no time to dwell on it, because Lixa gently touched his arm, guiding him from the chamber. He silently hoped the crown wouldn't fry his brain. Then again, maybe that was all part of the prophecy. Nerves struck him again when Lixa escorted him into a room she called the Chamber of Ascension. Soft silver-blue light glowed from filigreed inlays on the walls, and the floor was etched with a circular array of glyphs that reminded him of star charts. In the center stood a pedestal upon which a pale crystal shard hovered, rotating slowly. The crown of ascension, or helmet, was placed next to it in a gentle cradle of polished metal. Lixa's ceremonial attire was made of flowing ribbons of cloth that caught the light in ways that accentuated her long limbs. She moved closer, her voice quiet. We will both take part in the ritual. The memory shard contains fragments of Keeler's knowledge from ages past. If the crown has truly accepted you, you'll be able to absorb that knowledge without harm. Arthur eyed the shard with unease. You keep talking about absorbing knowledge. This sounds invasive. She touched his wrist lightly, sending a faint warmth up his arm. The process can be intense, but I will guide you. Without an anchor, a mind unused to our bond might be overwhelmed. He exhaled slowly. So you'll be in my head? A slight smile curved her lips. Our minds will brush. It is the only way. Commander Thess believes you are an imposter, but if the crown merges with you successfully, he will have no choice but to accept you. So will the rest of the council. Arthur frowned, though not at her. The notion of alien soldiers calling him Keeler was still as foreign as the star systems he had traveled through. But ignoring this call, now, might do more than just the Sulval if these Voidborn were as unstoppable as legends claimed. At least, that was the logic he clung to. All right, he said. Let's get this over with. She guided him to kneel before the pedestal. He took off the salvage chest plate he wore and set it aside. Lixin knelt across from him, the crystal shard between them rotating with an almost hypnotic hum. Gently, she rested her hands on his shoulders. The contact made the hair on the back of his neck prickle. Her skin was cool, but her presence felt, charged with some intangible energy. Close your eyes, she whispered. Empty your thoughts, and let the shard guide you. Arthur did as he was told. For a moment, only darkness and the sound of his own breathing filled his senses. Then, a tingling heat blossomed at the base of his skull. His heart lurched, and suddenly images flashed through his mind. Cities of gleaming towers, starships forging across cosmic oceans of darkness, battles fought under alien suns. He caught glimpses of a tall figure wearing the same helmet, holding a radiant blade that sliced through monstrous shapes, writhing with black energy. He sensed Lix's presence, calm yet vigilant, ushering him forward through the torrent of visions. He saw Sulval warriors standing shoulder to shoulder with beings that looked human. A wave of confusion rippled through him. That was impossible. According to what he'd learned, humans had only relatively recently ventured into interstellar space. Yet these images felt older than living memory. He felt Lix's surprise echo through his mind at the same moment as his own. She saw what he saw, a figure that was undeniably human, forging a pact with the Sulval, forging the crown. Then came the battle against the Voidborn, a swirling conflagration of shadows, shrieking horrors, and worlds left in ruin. Keeler, some ancient hero, led the Sulval in driving the Voidborn back into their dimension. And somewhere in the aftermath, the crown was hidden, waiting. Arthur gasped as the visions abruptly ended, leaving him kneeling in the dim chamber, chest heaving like he'd sprinted a marathon. Lix's hands steadied him, her expression one of mingled awe and shock. You saw them too, she said softly. Humans, fighting alongside my ancestors. He managed a nod. How? That can't be a coincidence. If the crown is showing us that, it means... She finished the thought. It means our people share a bond that predates our recorded histories. A beat passed. Despite the swirling confusion, Arthur became acutely aware of Lix's face so close to his, of the faint luminescence dancing along the edges of her robes. He felt the echo of the ritual's intimacy, her mind having touched his. It was more connection than he'd shared with anyone in a long time, maybe ever. In the hush, he noticed that the crown no longer felt oppressive. Instead, it hummed with a sense of belonging that tugged at his heart in ways he couldn't explain. This was no random fluke. Fate, if such a thing existed, had led him here. Lixa drew back, letting her hands slip away. We must tell the council. They believed only that Keeler would be reborn to aid us, not that Keeler could have a lineage tied to your species. This changes everything. Arthur swallowed, still reeling. I'm not sure if I'm ready to go in front of them again, but I suppose there's no turning back. She stood gracefully, offering him a hand. We'd Sulval hold destiny in high regard. If the crown chose you, then perhaps your path was always going to intersect ours. He took her hand, rising unsteadily. I've spent my life drifting, never staying in one place. Hard to think of that as destiny. Her lips curved in a gentle smile. Perhaps it's time you found a cause to stand for. Arthur caught his breath at the weight of those words. He wasn't sure if he believed in prophecy, but her quiet conviction stirred something inside him, a longing to do more than chase the next contract. The memory shard still pulsed at the edge of his awareness, filling him with fragments of ancient knowledge. Names of Sol Val heroes, weaknesses of the Voidborn, strategic illusions to exploit. He closed his eyes and steeled himself. When he opened them, he gave Lixa a determined nod. Let's see if Commander Thess is ready to have a conversation about how to defeat these Voidborn. The next day, Arthur stood in a large training arena deep within the Sol Val flagship. The deck hummed with energy beneath his boots, and the curved walls gleamed with the same silver hue he had come to associate with their technology. Sol Val warriors gathered in neat rows, their tall forms imposing in sleek armor. Across from them, Arthur's fellow mercenaries formed a ragged line. The contrast couldn't have been more pronounced. Commander Thess stood to Arthur's right, arms folded. Lixa was to his left, offering patient smiles to the humans who eyed the arena warily. Arthur cleared his throat. We're here to figure out how to combine our fighting styles. We humans favor quick, unpredictable skirmishes, what you might call guerrilla tactics. The Sol Val rely on strong formations and close coordination. If the Voidborn are as deadly as we're told, we'll need both to stand a chance. He glanced at Thess, half expecting a scoff. Instead, the commander's face showed guarded acceptance. Perhaps the ritual had finally convinced him that Arthur was not an imposter. Or maybe it was the conversation they'd had the night before, in which Arthur revealed fragments of knowledge only a rightful bearer of the crown could possess, secret tactics used in the ancient battles. Thess had been forced to concede that Arthur carried some truth about Keeler's legacy. Slowly, groups started mingling. Decker, with his shaved head and sardonic grin, began demonstrating hand signals to a squad of Sol Val warriors. Another mercenary named Powell tried to exchange banter with a tall female Sol Val, who stared at him in confusion. Progress was slow, peppered with misunderstandings and occasional flares of pride. Arthur moved between the groups, offering pointers where needed. He used the insights he had gleaned from the memory shard, describing how the old Keeler had forged alliances between warlike tribes long ago. It helped a little, but the differences were immense. Lixa observed from the sidelines, looking thoughtful. When a break was finally called, she pulled Arthur aside. These methods are foreign to us. Sol Val warriors are taught from childhood that direct confrontation is honorable, and stealth or misdirection are considered lesser tactics. I'm not sure how easily they will adapt. Arthur exhaled. They have to, if they want to survive. The Voidborn we fought on Terrace 4 were just scouts. The main force will be bigger, and they'll expect that Sol Val to fight in the way they always have. Hitting them with unorthodox moves might be the only edge we have. She bit her lower lip. Commander Thess might resent it. If we push too hard, we risk splitting our forces. A small surge of frustration flickered within Arthur. He wasn't used to politics. He was used to taking a job, completing it, and moving on. Yet now he found himself caring. Then we'll find a balance. Formation tactics have their advantages too. We can't throw that away. It's about merging our strengths. Lixa's eyes shone, as though seeing something in him that no one else had recognized. I believe you're starting to grasp why the crown chose you. Keeler was known for uniting conflicting factions. He forced a laugh. Me? I've spent most of my life avoiding ties of any kind. But maybe we're all forced to grow up eventually. She nodded, then hesitated, lowering her voice. Arthur, you must know that many Sol Val are losing faith in the prophecy. The memory shard you carry is important, but some still doubt you. To lead effectively, you may need to show them more than just borrowed visions. He chewed on that. I guess we'll have to convince them the old-fashioned way. Results. They rejoined the training session, working for hours to orchestrate small squads with combined skill sets. By the end, progress was visible if uneven. That Sol Val had learned some unpredictability. The humans had learned to coordinate more tightly. Arthur caught Thess watching from the far side of the arena with a pensive scowl. Their gazes met, and Thess gave him a slight inclination of his head. Perhaps, Arthur thought, it was a sign of acceptance. They soon discovered that time was not on their side. The Voidborn main fleet appeared on long-range sensors, traveling faster than Solval intelligence had predicted. It would reach their position in a matter of days. Council meetings became frantic. The idea of confronting the Voidborn in open space was proposed, then dismissed. Their fleet dwarfed the Solval Navy 3-1. Arthur suggested luring the Voidborn ground forces to a site with the special minerals that disrupted their dimension-linked powers. The council debated for hours before reaching a consensus. They would mount a ground defense near the site of the original Crown discovery on Terrace 4. As the newly allied forces mobilized, Arthur felt a growing pressure. The Crown was no longer just a symbol. It pulsed in his thoughts, offering snippets of ancient strategies half forgotten from the old Keeler's time. When he tried to sleep, images of swirling darkness assaulted him. Sometimes he woke to find Lixa quietly watching him. Though they had grown closer, the constant threat overshadowed any chance at normalcy. 2 days later, the main Solval flagship descended through Terrace IV's atmosphere, accompanied by a battered mercenary cruiser. Clouds of red dust rose around them. Arthur, now clad in Solval, crafted armor that combined the best of their designs and human functionality, surveyed the landing zone from a makeshift command post. Surrounding them, lines of Solval warriors and human mercenaries dug in, setting up energy barriers and camouflaged bunkers. Decker strolled up, rifle slung over one shoulder. "Feels weird to be on the same side as a bunch of blue-skinned aliens," he joked. "Not that I'm complaining." Arthur snorted. "A few days ago, you were whining about the desert heat." Decker shrugged. "Still am. But hey, if we're about to fight interdimensional shadow monsters, might as well do it with style." Below the ridge, a unit of Solval soldiers practiced new maneuvers with a trio of human mercenaries, the synergy finally starting to look smooth. It gave Arthur a glimmer of hope. Then the alarms blared, shrill and undeniable. Arthur spun to the nearest console, where Lixa stood reading the sensor feed. Her voice trembled as she turned to him. "They've arrived." The horizon darkened, as if a storm front approached. But it wasn't a storm. It was the Voidborn. Their ships were obsidian daggers in the sky, intangible black shapes that seemed to distort the air around them. As they drew closer, streaks of malevolent green energy flickered along their hulls. Commander Thess barked orders to Solval squads. Human mercenaries took positions. Arthur drew a breath and touched the crown, clipped to a bracket on his hip. He didn't want to wear it constantly, but now it felt like the only shield he had against the dread building inside him. He grabbed a comm device. "All units, stand by. Follow the plan. We let them land, then funnel them into the designated zone." The first wave of Voidborn craft landed with a thunderous impact. Hatches opened, disgorging shapes that seemed half-formed, all swirling darkness and vaguely humanoid outlines. They moved in unsettling silence, loping across the terrain with predatory speed. The Solval opened fire. Humans joined in, bullet and plasma rounds mixed with beams of silver energy. Some of the Voidborn dissolved under concentrated fire. Others flickered, as if phasing between dimensions, and reformed behind the battle lines. Arthur forced calm into his voice, issuing orders through the comm to ensure squads were treated in a controlled manner, luring the Voidborn deeper into the mineral-rich zone. Lixa did the same on a separate channel, calling out Solval formations. Step by step, the plan worked. The Voidborn found themselves chasing what looked like a panicked, disorganized retreat, only to realize too late that the ground was sapping their power. The atmosphere crackled with silver arcs. "Now!" Arthur shouted. Hidden emitters buried in the ground flared to life, magnifying the mineral effect. A wave of static rippled through the area, and dozens of Voidborn shrieked as their bodies lost cohesion, collapsing into writhing black sludge that evaporated in the hot wind. Cheers went up from the defenders. Then came the second wave. A massive Voidborn lander descended. Shrouds of darkness spilled out, forming grotesque shapes that coalesced into towering abominations. At their center strode a figure nearly twice as tall as any Solval, crowned with horns of black fire. A sickly green aura radiated from it, warping the air in ribbons of energy. Arthur's blood ran cold. He heard the name whispered over the comm in horror. The Void Sovereign. Before anyone could react, the Sovereign raised an arm of dripping shadow. Green lightning arced across the battlefield, knocking Solval warriors off their feet. Some convulsed and went limp. Others clutched at black wounds that crept up their limbs like living decay. Decker's voice crackled in Arthur's earpiece. "This is insane, boss. Our guns aren't making a dent in that big one." Arthur clenched his jaw. "Thess, Lixa, we need a final fallback to the central chamber. We still have the failsafe." Commander Thess, grim-faced, gave the order. Solval squads withdrew, forming a defensive line. The humans provided covering fire, though each shot seemed pitiful against the Void Sovereign's aura. Slowly, step by step, they retreated into a subchamber beneath the rocky terrain, the same place Arthur had first found the crown. Beneath the ground, they had rigged a final contingency. The Sovereign followed, flanked by hordes of lesser Voidborn. Arthur watched from behind an energy barrier, heart pounding. They had to let it come deeper inside, where the minerals were at their densest. Lixa, at his side, was pale but resolute. "It knows you're here," she said quietly. "It senses the crown." Arthur set his jaw and slid the crown onto his head. Instantly, a surge of adrenaline-like clarity spread through his mind. The ancient Keeler's knowledge flared, a memory of how they had banished the Voidborn once before. There had been a portal mechanism built in times long past to cast them back into their dimension. It was hidden at the core of this site. He signaled Lixa, "Activate the device." She pressed her hand to a glowing console. The floor of the chamber lit up, ancient glyphs flickering to life. A distant hum grew as power cascaded around them. The Voidborn started shrieking, as if sensing what was about to happen. The Sovereign flung its arm forward, trying to launch another barrage of corrupting lightning. Arthur braced. Lixa's scream tore the air. She collapsed, struck by a glancing arc. Arthur dove to her side. The black corruption spread across her arm, but her expression was fierce. "Finish it," she said through clenched teeth. Arthur gritted his teeth against panic. He laid his hand over the creeping darkness. The crown flared, and faint silver lines danced across Lixa's skin, halting the corruption. She gasped in relief, though pain still etched her features. The humming in the chamber intensified, and the ground shook. A swirling vortex of light opened in the center of the floor, a gateway shimmering in pale silver. The plan was to unleash the portal that would pull the Voidborn back to their home dimension, but it required a final push of energy. Keeler's energy drawn through the crown. Arthur stood, locking eyes with the Sovereign. Waves of malevolent power radiated from the monstrous figure. It glided forward, each step turning the air around it murky green. Arthur steadied himself, pressing a hand to the crown's crest. He felt the memories of past Keeler, thousands of voices urging him to stand firm. He raised his other hand, focusing on the swirling portal. "You're not staying here," he muttered through gritted teeth. The Sovereign roared, an unearthly sound that resonated directly in Arthur's mind. "The crown cannot save you, human. All shall be devoured." Arthur forced everything he had, anger, determination, hope, into the crown. Light exploded around him, forming a barrier of silvery arcs. The Void Sovereign recoiled. The swirling portal expanded, vacuum-like wind roaring through the chamber. Smaller Voidborn shapes were dragged in, dissolving as they crossed the threshold into their dimension. The Sovereign fought it, planting spindly limbs into the ground, shadowy claws slicing at the floor. Commander Thess, Lixa, and a handful of Solval warriors pushed energy weapons to maximum output, pounding the Sovereign's flank. Humans poured rifle fire into it. Under relentless pressure, the beast faltered. Green lightning sputtered, then died as the Sovereign slid closer to the vortex. The roar in Arthur's mind intensified, a final psychic assault that threatened to tear his sanity apart. He staggered, almost losing focus. Then Lixa's hand found his. The warmth of her touch cut through the chaos. He saw in her eyes the quiet devotion that had grown between them, forged by the shared ritual and the battles fought side by side. That bond steadied him. He shouted, and the crown responded. A lance of brilliant light speared from it to the sovereign, shattering the last barrier. With a final, mind-rending shriek, the void sovereign was consumed by the portal's pull. Black filaments whipped around it as it was dragged in. Then it was gone, and the portal slammed shut, leaving only stunned silence in the chamber. Arthur sank to his knees, exhaustion sweeping over him. Lixa fell next to him, breathing heavily. All around, Sul-Val warriors and human mercenaries stared in shock. The threat, at least for now, was over. Weeks later, the aftermath was visible in both the battered remains of the Sul-Val flagship and the haunted eyes of the survivors. Repairs had begun, and the planet's scorching wind still carried the stale odor of old metal and dust. But a sense of hopeful calm had taken root. The Voidborn main force had been crippled or pulled into the portal. Scouts confirmed that the rest of their fleet retreated to some distant sector, presumably to lick their wounds. Arthur found a moment of peace on a ridge overlooking a newly built memorial. Stone monoliths, engraved with Sul-Val script alongside Earth's standard, honored the fallen. Decker stood at his side, arms crossed, as they quietly paid their respects. "Never thought I'd see my name on an alien memorial," Decker murmured. Then, with a sideways glance, "Heard you're staying?" Arthur shrugged, though he already knew his answer. The Sul-Val want to formalize an alliance with humanity. High Elder Ren is sending an envoy to the Galactic Coalition, and I guess they need someone who understands both sides. Decker slapped him on the shoulder. "You sure? Could always come back with us, find a new contract." Arthur smiled sadly. "Nah, I've been drifting too long. Turns out I'm tired of it." Decker grinned. "Guess this prophecy gig really got under your skin. Or maybe it's that blue-skinned scholar who likes you so much." Arthur felt warmth blooming in his chest. Lixa had recovered from her injuries, though the black scars lingered on her arm. They'd grown closer in the aftermath, sharing more than just battlefields. Something deeper had formed, a connection neither had expected. The memory of her mind and his still tugged at him, comforting. He gave Decker a friendly punch in the arm. "Take care, man. If you ever need me, well, you know where I'll be." Decker nodded, and they parted with a handshake. Later that day, Arthur stepped into a grand hall aboard the Sul-Val vessel, where Lixa waited in a new set of robes embroidered with swirling silver designs. He noticed her arm covered by a fitted sleeve, but she gave him a soft smile that spoke of resilience. High Elder Ren was there too, flanked by the remaining members of the council. Commander Thess stood to one side, posture straighter than usual. The council began a ceremonial oration in the Sul-Val tongue, speaking of unity, shared heritage, and new beginnings. Ren then turned to Arthur, addressing him in standard for the final pronouncement. "Arthur Vega, you stand here no longer as an outsider. Your people are welcomed among ours. We know now that Keeler was not a single bloodline, but a bond between our species. We honor you." Commander Thess removed one gauntlet and placed his bare palm against Arthur's chest in a gesture of respect. "I doubted you, but the crown's choice was clear. You have my loyalty, Keeler." Arthur nodded, feeling a lump in his throat. The idea of being accepted this fully was foreign. For so long, he had considered himself a gun for hire, nothing more. Now, these people looked to him as a symbol of an ancient partnership renewed. When the formalities concluded, Lixa approached him, her eyes bright. "High Elder Ren wants us to lead the first diplomatic mission to Earth space. He believes that you and I are best suited to ensure that this alliance grows." Arthur drew a steadying breath. "I'll do it. But first, there's something I need to say." Her brows lifted slightly in question. He gently took her injured arm, pressing his palm to hers. You've shown me more trust and respect than I ever earned anywhere else. Without you guiding me, I'd have never figured out how to use the crown or even believed it was real. And I don't want to lead your people because of a prophecy. I want to help build a future with you." He paused, uncertain how she might react. She threaded her fingers through his. My people say that destiny is not just foretold. It's shaped by those who embrace it. You have embraced yours. I'd be honored to shape that future with you. He lowered his forehead to hers, feeling the coolness of her skin, and closed his eyes. A hush fell in the hall as Tsul, Val, and human onlookers realized the significance of the gesture. Two species, once strangers, forging a deep bond. The crown, which Arthur had placed aside for the ceremony, seemed to pulse softly as if it, too, bore witness. When they parted, Lixa gave a small laugh, the chime of it echoing. Shall we see where this alliance takes us? He nodded, a smile pulling at his lips. Yeah, let's. Outside, Terrace IV's relentless sun beat down, but the old battlefield held a new promise. Repairs were underway, joint Sulval, human teams working in tandem. The fallen had been honored, the nightmares of the void-born push repelled. For the first time, the planet felt like it might become a place of rebirth rather than a graveyard. As Arthur walked away from the hall, Lixa beside him, he thought back to the moment he'd struck metal with his shovel, cursing the scorching heat. How could he have guessed that unearthing a single helmet would change everything? Yet, looking into Lixa's eyes and seeing the new hope reflected in the soldiers busily rebuilding, he felt something close to gratitude for whatever cosmic force had guided him here. He remembered the final words from the memory shard, faint echoes of the old Keeler's farewell. We fought for a future neither species could achieve alone. Let these ties endure, bound by courage and trust. Arthur Vega, the man who once drifted without purpose, took Lixa's hand and let himself imagine a galaxy transformed. Maybe the prophecy had always been less about some mystical calling and more about the simple truth that unity could conquer even the darkest threat. And if the Voidborn ever returned, they would find not a fractured galaxy, but two people standing side by side, backed by the legacy of Keeler, by modern innovation, and by a bond forged in fire and sealed with hope. In that moment, Arthur felt every uncertain step leading him here was worth it. He had found not just a mission, but a home.